let's get started. So I'm going to start by just lightly sketching a vase, and I'm going to keep it really simple for this video. We're going to do a straight cylinder style vase. So just two straight lines, and do a little curved line at the bottom, a little curved at the top, and then the upward curve to create the round opening. And then just pick where you want your water line to be and draw two more lines in there to designate the water line. Just keep it loose. Now the colors I'm using, I like to use a mix of different blues. I'm using turquoise. These are all Winsor Newton. I'm using a Daniel Smith, which is a phthalo turquoise, which is like a greenish blue. And for my deep blue, I'm using an old Holland watercolor called Indigo. And then so I always put a little bit of green, and this time I'm using Viridian by Winsor Newton also. And I've got my 2 jars of water, one for dirty water and one for clean. And I am using a size 6 round brush. When I do bigger paintings, I'll use a higher number, which means a bigger brush. But right now, for this, I'm using a size 6. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my blue. This is just a medium blue, very watered down. We're just going to start with washes, so you can see it's very pale. And I'm just putting some along the edges. Now be sure to leave some white somewhere on there, mostly, preferably around the middle. Just kind of a irregular shape. Leave it open. That'll help define the roundness of your bowl. It'll act like a highlight. We're not using white, so the white paper will act as our highlight. And you can see I'm just doing a wash on the other parts of the vase, not quite as dark, up on the top of the vase where there's no water. Now I've decided on this one the shadow is going to be on the left-hand side, so you're going to see me making it much darker on the left-hand side. And I'm working pretty much very wet right now, and I'm bringing in a little bit deeper blue, and I'm going to start at the bottom left corner because that's where my shadow is going to be the strongest, and I'm just kind of tapping it in. Less is more. Just add it slowly. And you can always come back and blend out to keep from having any harsh lines. And I'm just going to bring it along the bottom just a little bit, so it kind of fades out more as it pulls to the right. And just some clear water here to kind of fade it out. And notice I'm not putting blue over the center part there. I'm leaving that white. I want that to act as a highlight. A little bit. You can see on my the little jar I did on that small piece of watercolor paper on the left. That's what we're aiming for. So you can kind of see where I'm headed. Now there's no water up at the top in that vase, but it's still going to be shadowed. So I'm adding a little bit of the darker blue up at the top on the left side, and then blending it. And now that center part, I left that blank because I didn't want the colors to all bleed together, the top to the bottom. So now I'm just going in, I'm just putting a light wash of color, and I'm going to progressively make it a little bit darker. And I'm just being really careful, using just the very point of my round brush. Just go slowly, just add a little bit of color at a time. I'll put a little bit on the right here to kind of define that bottom right edge. Picking up some more blue. Now I'm picking up that dark, the indigo blue. It's much darker, and I'm just going to tap it in. This is all very wet, so when I tap it in, it'll start to bleed on its own. And if it doesn't bleed enough, add a little bit of water, and that will make it kind of bleed and blend all on its own. And again, tapping in up on the top left, because again, even though there's no water there, that's still going to be more in the shadows than the right side. And whenever you see you might be getting a hard edge on your paint, you can always add some clean water. And here I'm just kind of tidying up that edge where the water is. And this is meant to be very whimsical, so, you know, if things bleed a little bit into each other, it's not that big a deal. So you can see there I just darkened that top edge, and that already gives it that appearance of it being in a round cylinder vase. It's giving it some depth. Now what I'm doing here, that green that I showed you, I'm adding a little bit of watered down green. That's that Viridian color. Because usually water, for me anyway, when I do them, the water does tend to get a little bit green. It'll be reflecting from the stems, or maybe just the water turns slightly green when, you know, the greenery, the stems and the leaves kind of get soaked in the water. So I usually have my water be kind of bluish and greenish in tone. So now I'm coming back with some more of that deeper blue, the indigo blue, and really any deep blue will work. Doesn't have to be the brands that I showed you. You can play around and find the right shades of blues that you like to use. I do like to keep them in the turquoisey family. I just think that blue-green is just it just seems like a natural for water. So I'm getting a little bit darker here, picking up a little of the dark, just to kind of define that top edge, and I'm just going little by little. And I'm raising up that left corner. I noticed it seemed a little low, so I'm just raised it up a little bit to find the back edge of that top water level. A little bit more dark blue up in the corner. Define the side of the brush, and now I've just picked up some clear water and I'm just blending. Whenever you see too many demarcation lines, just pick up some clear water and you can blend them away. Okay, our vase is dry to the touch. We're going to learn to paint some whimsical roses and easy rose leaves. I've got my paints assembled. I've got two greens. I've got a sap green, medium, and I have an undersea green, which is a dark green. My favorite pink, permanent rose. I've got rose madder and carmine, two darker pinks, and cadmium orange. I'm going to set those aside. And we'll get ready to paint some beautiful loose roses. So I'm going to start by picking up some permanent rose and kind of work it into the bristles. It's my favorite rose colored watercolor, permanent rose. I believe this is a Winsor Newton color. So these you're going to start by making just a simple flattened oval, leave it empty in the middle, and then just some swishing back and forth, just some brush strokes, nothing precise. You can see there I didn't spend a lot of time trying to make it look like real rose petals. I'm just kind of swishing some color, keeping it in a bowl shape though. If it helps to sketch out kind of a rose shape, a bowl shape, and then paint inside, staying inside those lines, you can try that until you get really good at it freehand. But as you can see, I'm not being very descriptive at all. I'm being very whimsical, very loose. And then I'm going to pick up some of the darker pink. You can use either rose madder or carmine or any dark pink. And I'm going to use it to define inside the bowl of the rose. See, already makes a little bit difference. And then I'm going to put it at the base of each rose. And that's going to do a couple things. It's going to separate these roses so it's not just a glob of pale pink. And it's also going to shadow them because they would be deeper at the base. where all the petals come together. So just, and if you see too much of a demarcation line, add a little water to blend that color in. Now you can go back and add a little bit more at the base, or you can let it dry and come back after it's dried and add some more darker pink at the base. I'm going to put a few little buds here, and really buds are just little teardrop shapes. And then something I love doing is picking up some orange. This is my cadmium orange, and just here and there some watery orange. You don't have to cover the whole rose. And be careful not to cover up all of the white spaces, because it's nice to leave. See where I've got some white left on the roses? That acts like a highlight, because we don't have white paint in watercolor, not technically. So your white paper acts like a highlight. So there's your roses. Now for the stems, when we paint these, we're going to paint down, skip over the top front rim and skip over the top front water line. Otherwise it's going to look like your stem is outside your vase. So I'm going to add a little greenery at the base, and I'm going to stop and then continue. You can go over the back water line. When you get to the front water line, stop and then continue on the other side. And it's okay to bend it a little bit. See right there? That's the light what's the word? Refraction, that's the word, where it looks like it bends the stem. So that's quite normal. Add a little greenery wherever I see little white spaces. That would be the green underneath the rose. Put my stems in. Now I'm being careful to keep my green away from the pink right now, because I don't want it to bleed too much. But again, as I paint the stems, you'll see that I'm skipping over the top front rim. See, I stop and then pick up again, come down, and then stop again at the front water line, because you want your stems to be behind those two lines, not in front of them. And don't worry so much about, oh, I've got 5 flowers, I have to have 5 stems. Not really. Lots of times flowers, multiple flowers are on one stem, so that's not always a hard rule written in stone. Okay, so I've got my stems in there. And then what I'll do is I want to blur the bottom stem that's under the water. So I'll take some clear water and then just add it and let that green paint bleed out a little bit. Kind of like maybe giving it the image of the chlorophyll in the green stem kind of leaching into the water. You know how your flower water gets a few days later? Not so crystal clear. And I'm just going back in and adding some little, I don't know what they're called, those little bud bumps underneath the petals. Kind of add them in. You can add little touches of dark green here and there to kind of add to the shadows. Now here's a super easy rose leaf, like a windshield wiper, swiping back and forth, starting wider and getting narrow. Start wider and then get narrow, kind of like a triangle. You can use some of the dark undersea green to kind of shade it, the bottom half. You can put your leaves anywhere. Just be careful if you're going to want to put them in the middle of your roses or on top, because the roses are still wet. So you would have to either let the roses dry or leave some white space when you paint the roses to fill in with leaves. You can see on the bottom 2 roses, some of the green underneath the rose has leached into the pink. I mean, actually in this case it looks pretty cool, so I'll just leave it. But you wouldn't want too much of that. And then just add your leaves wherever you want. This is such an easy, quick leaf. Just windshield wiper motion back and forth with the tip and then end at a point. Super easy. You can go back in with some of your darker green, fill in some of that white space. Now if you have any harsh lines, go back in with clear water and kind of soften them out. You can go back in and define your stems a little bit. I'll usually darken the stem that's coming behind the front stem. It gives it more of an illusion of them being stacked front to back. Don't try to put your veining in when it's wet because it'll just bleed out. Let the leaves dry and then go back and you can add your veins. So that's it. Easy roses, leaves, and water in a vase. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider hitting the subscribe button and hit the like button. And thank you all so much for watching.